Welcome to the Austin Forum Upload, the podcast of the Austin Forum on Technology and Society. I'm Jay Boisseau, the Executive Director and founder of the Austin Forum on Technology and Society. And for this episode, I'm very excited to have Hugh Forrest, the Co-President and Chief Programming Officer of South by Southwest, also a longtime colleague, friend, and member of the advisory board of the Austin Forum. Hugh, thanks for joining us.
Jay, thanks for getting me back on the podcast. I am so excited to be here.
Well, we're excited to have you too, even though I normally get excited to have you on for South by Southwest in March in Austin, which takes place a mere 8 blocks from my condo, plus or minus, depending on the event. But today's episode is going to be focused on a new South by Southwest event, South by Southwest Sydney. So let's start with the softball question. Why is there a South by Southwest Sydney this year?
We'd been talking a lot with people in Australia pre-pandemic, and in fact, even a little more context there. We get a lot of inquiries, traditionally get a lot of inquiries from other cities, other regions, other countries. Can we do a South by Southwest here? We tend to run down all these queries. The queries we had from Australia were certainly stronger, more emphatic, more serious than a lot of things we've seen. Again, we started having some pretty serious negotiations with a lot of people in Australia pre-pandemic, and then that got put on hold in March 2020 when the whole world got put on hold for a year and a half, and then we were able to put together a deal on this in spring 2021. We're really excited about this new event. It brings the energy, the enthusiasm, the passion, the inspiration, the discovery of South by Southwest to a completely different part of the world. Yes, we have a lot of people from Australia and New Zealand coming to March in Austin, but certainly there are a ton more people who just, can't do that 14-hour flight or can't take the time off that it necessitates to come to Austin. So we think this opens up a completely new audience in Australia and New Zealand, as well as in what we would call the Pacific Rim, and what I learned from being in Sydney last week, they refer to more as the APAC, the Asian Pacific countries.
So what I really heard from that explanation was the Australians were more aggressive about it, which I applaud, by the way, but also that it's in a different region and brings South by to a different part of the world. Was there anything specific about Sydney? I mean, obviously it's a major global city, strong tech there, strong music, strong film. Is it particularly strong in the areas that South by generally covers?
Yes, a very strong creative community in Sydney. And that was a big part of the decision-making process to go in on this event. There's strong representation from a lot of the big tech companies in Sydney. There is a strong startup scene there. There is a very vibrant gaming scene in Sydney, and the film industry, as well as the music scene is pretty strong also, and very similar to what we've seen in Austin, and what has been a big part of the formula for success for South by Southwest is it's just a great city. People want to go there. There's great food, great culture, very diverse ethnicity there. You have the harbor region, which everyone kind of knows, but there are lots of other incredible neighborhoods. So again, it is a great destination, and we are so excited to be helping with this event there in October.
Super exciting. I'm hopeful that I can figure out a way to go. I've always avoided trips to Australia, not because I'm not interested in Australia, but because I was always going to be in economy class, and I'm 6'1", and I couldn't bear the thought of of a trip there to that. But I'm hopeful you weren't in the back of the plane, being much taller even than me, and that is a long flight to there. Do you expect a lot of U.S. folks to attend?
Yes, it is 14 hours from Dallas, or 14 hours back to Dallas, a mere 12 hours if you go through LAX. And yes, that's a long flight. The upside is that if you can kind of treat it as a long night, and then you wake up and you're there. But to your question, do we expect a lot of people from the U.S. to go to the event? I think we'll get a fair amount. You've certainly expressed a lot of interest, Jay, and I know that you're an influencer and trendsetter. So if you come to Sydney,
I'm sure I could influence one or two people to go. Yeah,
they're great. We're golden. So yeah, it will draw an international audience, similar to what we are able to draw, or what we're fortunate enough to draw in Austin.
So what do you think are going to be the big differences in this? And I mean this in a couple of ways, so you can address them together or separately. One is the feel of it. Sydney and Austin, both great cities, but not identical cities. So how might the feel be different? Maybe the convention center and the hotel layout is different there. I'm not sure. But also in terms of tech, when we had South by here in March, ChatGPT was just erupting, and in fact, erupting after the panel picker had closed. You still had content in the programming about it, but it was really bursting onto the scenes, or generative AI overall, I should say, bursting onto the scenes. What are you seeing different in vibe and in relative tech content for South by Sydney?
Well, let me go back to the first part of your question there. A lot of the team that is working on the Sydney event, the Sydney-based team, came to Austin in March to try to drink up as much of the event, and use that as a kind of baseline for what they're planning there. They've been very strategic in terms of their footprint in the downtown area of Sydney, and trying to, understand like the longest point you'd have to walk in Austin, and trying to match up the distances in Sydney there. So trying to create an event that's very walkable. Again, it'll be a lot of that will be equidistant or close to the harbor section, also close to UTS, which is University of Technology Sydney, which is a huge institution, and we'll be hosting a lot of content there. So again, from a footprint standpoint, from ability to walk from one thing to another, from one completely different event to another completely different event, I think that will replicate a lot of Austin. In terms of the tech content at the event, yes, AI is going to be very, very present in so much of the content. But simply, that's where we are right now as we record this in June 2023. But I don't see anything significantly changing by October 2023 or March 2024, for that matter. It is, all that said, it's interesting. There's there's a fairly strong Austin or South by Southwest flavor in terms of what our friends in Sydney have announced or confirmed so far. For instance, Ben Lamb, who is part-time Austin resident, part-time Dallas resident, I think at this point, will be talking there. As most of your listeners are probably aware, Ben is now involved with a startup called Colossal, and they're trying to bring back dinosaurs that have been long extinct, and so it's bioengineering and all the many ethical questions that
and they're trying to bring back the Tasmanian tiger, which is relevant to South by Sydney, right?
Absolutely. That's the focus of the session, is the Tasmanian tiger. Yes. Also speaking in one of their keynotes for 2023, is Amy Webb, who has been a fixture at South by Southwest for the last 10 years. And a lot of people know that they try to go to her session and they can't get in because it's too crowded. But she will be doing a slightly different version of her Austin Tech Trends talk there. And we know that she's also very interested in bioengineering per the book reading that's coming up on the Austin Forum end of July, which I may well be hosting. So again, I think there's a lot of bioengineering. There'll be a lot of bioengineering content, and certainly a lot of content related to climate change for the Sydney event in October. They are very much, for this first year, replicating the event on or using Austin as kind of a baseline for what they do with the event. I think that's a smart move, but I also think it's a smart move that, as they get the first year under their belt and move to a year 2, year 3, that they, evolve a little and event gets more of its own personality, focuses even more on what makes Sydney unique and different than Austin. I think that's always been the what's been successful at South by Southwest is very much pattern the event after the creativity in Austin, and Sydney should do the same, I think, and will do the same.
So commonality, overall structure, focus on creativity, inclusion of tech and music and film, largely leveraging the Austin South by blueprint for this first year. And over time, while staying in that same creativity space and with some common themes like tech and music and film, beginning to differentiate based on Sydney differences, Australia differences, maybe regional differences as well. Is that fair?
Absolutely. The only thing I will slightly correct you on there is that what we call film in Austin and what we morphed the name to roughly a year ago, which was film and TV, they are calling simply screens, which is a tip of the hat that we absorb that content now in all kinds of different screens, whether that be at a theater, whether that be on your television, whether that be on your smartphone, whether that be on your headset, but that it's all content one way or another.
And this meeting is expected to be an annual meeting from now on too, like the one in Austin, right?
Yeah, it's got a runway of at least 5 years, hopefully longer. Sydney, for all the things that we know about Sydney, that it hosted the Olympics, that it's this great destination, that it's got this iconic opera house. They are continuing to explore new ways to position it as this, a destination of creativity, a startup hub, and they see South by Southwest, what we've been able to do in Austin as a key element to this path forward in terms of attracting the next generation of companies to the city, the next generation of innovators, creators, and again, they're incredibly excited about it also. I was lucky enough to be in Sydney for a week last week, so met a lot of stakeholders, met a lot of venue owners, people in the community, was able to do a lot of interviews about the event. And again, people are really, really excited. People are very aware of what Austin is and how South by Southwest has impacted Austin, and want to see how this will play out in Australia as well.
Well, congratulations on being able to launch this and it having a runway. I guess I should ask, do you have any plans, at least plans that you can share publicly in this podcast, that for other launches of South by in other regions? I know you've had South by events in other cities in the past. Maybe you want to share those and how long they ran and what their purpose and differences were and how that differs from what you're doing now in Sydney and what the future might hold.
Yeah, we have done or been involved with a lot of different events over the years. Way back in the mid 90s, we did a thing in St. Louis called the Mississippi River Music Festival, MRMF.
I did not know that.
You did
Wow.
not know
Okay.
that. We did a thing in Portland, Oregon for a few years called North by Northwest. Doesn't that name sound familiar? We had a tech event in Las Vegas for several years called V2V. That was when Tony Hsieh was in his heyday of trying to make Las Vegas a center of innovation, a center of creativity. We're also involved with that event at the White House for 1 year, did some stuff in Europe with Mercedes in Frankfurt, as well as in Stockholm. But the differences on those events versus the event in Sydney are significant. One, we've never had anything branded with the name South by Southwest outside of Austin before, so that's significant. Two, the efforts, the amount of people, the vision for these other events were never quite as grand as what is planned in Sydney. I mean, there's a team of 40 people on the ground in Sydney that is doing the day-to-day work, that is putting together this amazing event that has lots of questions from for the Austin team that we meet with regularly. You know, as you said, they're using the Austin event as a blueprint. They had their own version of panel picker, and since we all love alliteration, that version was called Session Select, so slightly different alliteration, but they got roughly, I think, 2,000 ideas through the Session Select process. And they've gotten some great stuff there. So to your question, is this, are there other events on the horizon in other cities and other countries? Who knows? I mean, it's a huge effort to get Australia off the ground, and we want to make that a success. If so, and if the right opportunity comes up at some other place in the world, then we're open in all ears in terms of how we can expand the brand. And certainly one of the big pluses of Sydney was that we didn't feel like it would cannibalize what we do in March in Austin. That there's quite a few people coming from Australia and New Zealand, but there's again a huge audience there we haven't tapped into. So I think that would be one of the factors that we would look to for any future event, whether that's 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, who knows?
Got it. Well, I didn't get the answer I was hoping for about South by Southwest, Paris or Prague, but I'll keep my fingers crossed for that. So
the P words there, Paris and Prague, and
I am fine with London and Berlin as well. Istanbul also, love Budapest as well. So, let's just keep all those in mind. So as we get closer to this, there's certainly going to be some big names speaking at this. And, I don't really go to South by Southwest with the intent of hearing big names. I go to hear big ideas, but nonetheless, big names are often that for a reason. They've accomplished some big things in the past, working on big things in the present. You mentioned Ben Lamb. You mentioned Amy Webb. Anyone else that we should be aware of that is going to present there that we may want to try to access the content in some way? And will it be possible to access some of the South by Sydney content if you can't attend?
Reverse order on those answers. I believe there will be some degree of video content or streaming content coming out of the event. Probably not as much as we have in Austin, simply because they need to figure out how to do an IRL event first and then get an add-on video or streaming later. In terms of big name speakers, again, Ben Lamb, Amy Webb, a woman named Ying Liu, who has spoken at South by Southwest a couple times. You may remember or recall her. She is the designer of the Twitter fail whale, which we used to see a lot more of in the early days of Twitter. Maybe it's returning given all the current challenges or some of the current challenges. There are still several keynotes for Sydney that have not yet been announced, and I can't reveal them as much as I would like to on this podcast, but there'll be I think they'll follow the very much follow the Austin formula of mixing in new names that you haven't heard of yet with older names that you have heard of. I was in Sydney last week and did quite a few presentations about South by Southwest and about how South by Southwest can be a model for Sydney. And one of the photos that I showed in my presentation, which I think you've probably seen, Jay, is that photo of Johnny Cash at Emo's back in 1994, where the person next to him is a 19-year-old Beck, and that's the vibe you're looking for, someone who's very established, maybe looking to rebrand their career and mix that in with someone who you haven't heard of yet, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now, will be someone who you're very, very familiar with.
Well, if I had a vote on this, it would be my Marvel superhero crush of Chris Hemsworth, since he's already in the neighborhood, has embraced technology with an app on the iPhone for fitness, and even had an Apple Music playlist. So I look forward to seeing the announcements are and who's there. And hopefully we can see some of this content either live or recorded after the fact. With that, I'm going to close this with your recommendations on what our listeners should do to track what is going on at South by Sydney, but also what should we be doing now to prepare for South by 2024 in Austin?
Way to tee that up, Jay. Well, so Sydney, as always, similar to Austin, the best way to keep in touch is just following the website and following the social media channels there from there. And that website is SXSW Sydney.com, SXSWSydney.com. You can put an AU at the end of it, but you don't have to. They've got a lot of content listed there, and again, many more announcements to come. The event is October 15th through 22nd, so they're roughly 120 days away, which, in Austin terms, that's mid-December. And we know that a lot of the most intriguing content for Austin is announced in the weeks and months after that. So again, lots of new of cool things to be revealed soon. In terms of South by Southwest 2024 in Austin, Texas in March, the important thing for all your listeners to know, to think about, is that on June 27th, we open up the panel picker entry process. This is where anyone in the community, meaning anyone who can get in line, can put in a speaking proposal for the 2024 event. That process runs through end of the day on Sunday, July 23rd. There's no incentive to get your proposal in before July 23rd. So work on it as much as possible. Back to something that you said earlier, it's going to be interesting, quote unquote. How many proposals for 2024 will have the aid of ChatGPT in terms of, the description, the title,
or how many of them are written using ChatGPT is where I thought you were going to go. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that, what we've talked about a lot internally is, well, do we say that people can't use ChatGPT? No, I don't think that makes sense. But, one of the things in the panel picker application is that we asked for resources, and that is typically a video. And I think we'll be putting a lot more emphasis on the video this year, because the video will I think be a little bit of a tell of, does the person really understand this topic? Or again, did they lean on the current technology to come up with an intriguing proposal that is perhaps not reflective of their expertise?
Yeah, and I would further add that people probably won't get very far that way. It's a highly competitive process. And while ChatGPT can write short things fairly well, it's also limited in its input data to September 2021. So if you're trying to present the very latest results in your field, in your panel picker submission, maybe not the best way to go with ChatGPT.
But as many people much smarter than I have said. I mean, I think that ChatGPT, Bard, whatever comes out in the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, that is a great place to start the creative process. Get some ideas from there, get some drafts from there, and then use your human creativity to make those drafts a lot better in terms of the accuracy, the whatever information has come out since September 2021, pulling in some different ideas that aren't there. But again, you use it for what it is, which is a resource, not an end destination.
And that's a great point. In our last Austin Forum big event a week or so ago, we had tables after the presentation led by experts in generative AI tools, where we walked people through using these, but the primary emphasis was on using them for co-creation, not replacement, but co-creation, starting things, gathering some info that maybe you didn't know, but absolutely no replacement for expertise and for finishing touches and such by the person who was preparing and submitting content. So with that, though, thank you very much for joining us, Hugh. Super excited to hear more about South by Southwest Sydney, hoping I can find some excuse to go down there, and absolutely have an intent to submit to the panel picker process coming up. We'll encourage all of our listeners, attendees at our events to do that. If you'd like to hear more from Hugh Forrest, he alluded to it earlier in the podcast, but he will be moderating an online Austin Forum event on July 26th at 7:15 p.m. Central Daylight Time. And it's a discussion of the ideas in the book, The Genesis Machine, Our Quest to Rewrite Life in the Age of Synthetic Biology. So the Austin Forum, in addition to these podcasts, has online events that are not recorded. So if you want to attend those, you are absolutely encouraged to. You're free to speak up, and you can do so knowing that those will not be recorded. It will just be a moderated discussion by our own Hugh Forrest. Hugh, thanks for joining us today. Look forward to seeing you at an event soon. I'll be on that book discussion as well, and look forward to talking to you more as the summer goes on.
Thanks, Jay. Great to be here and excited about the Amy Webb book discussion at the end of July.
And welcome back. I hope you're over the jet lag.
I absolutely am.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Austin Forum Upload. You can listen to additional episodes and check out a schedule of our monthly in-person events at austinforum.org. The Upload is a production of the Austin Forum on Technology and Society, a nonprofit organization here in Austin, Texas.